Ladies and gentlemen around the world, moin from Hamburg and welcome to our 7th session of Connecting Ports, our global talk show that brings people together to discuss ports, terminals and the maritime supply chain. My name is Christina Prieser. I'm a transport economist and associated partner at HPC Hamburg Port Consulting, and I'm looking very much forward to lead through today's session. So thank you very much for joining us. Following our motto, debating what matters, we are here to talk about topics that count. Your perspectives are invaluable, so please share your thoughts, questions and ideas via the chat, and together let's gain a thorough understanding of our topic which is significant for our community. Today's session zooms in on a topic of high relevance, namely seamless terminal automation migration, converting systems without disruption. We will explore how terminals can maintain continuous operations during their transition to automation. We are focusing on how to manage changes required for converting manually into automatically operated terminals, not only technically, but also regarding early involvement of staff and authorities, as well as regarding expectation management. So let's get started by introducing our 3 insightful speakers poised to delve into this topic. We are honored to welcome Ceci, joining us from the United States. He is the Senior Vice President, Technology and Projects at Virginia International Terminals. Known as a leading authority in port automation, Rich brings a treasure trove of knowledge in both the technical and operational facets of port automation. So, Rich, it's a great pleasure to have you with us today. Welcome. Next, we are happy to have Jan Cuppens joining us. He describes himself nowadays as a pragmatic port advisor after a 3-year career in the port and terminal world, when he was Vice President Global Engineering for DP World, involved in overseeing engineering projects across their global network. Today, Jan will delve into the intricate details of automating brownfield terminals, addressing both overestimated benefits and underestimated challenges involved. Warm welcome, Jan. And last, but certainly not least, we are delighted to welcome Dennis Koegeboehn as our studio guest today. Dennis is Program Manager, Process and Technology at GatewaySA, a company of Flinders Port Holdings in Adelaide, Australia, dealing with transformation of the terminal from manual straddle carrier to automated RTG operation. Prior to this role, Dennis spent 2 decades in consultancy, dedicating his efforts to the operational transformation of ports and terminals worldwide. Thank you for being here today, Dennis.
My pleasure.
With this overview in mind, let's now shift our focus to today's topic. We have prepared a brief video to give you an introduction. After we are now all up to speed, we start with a seasoned professional celebrating 20 years in the terminal industry and reflecting on this milestone. Rich, can you share with us the first automation project you worked on that stands out as particularly memorable, and what made it so impressive for you?
Well, I think when I saw the question, I thought, I'll talk about the first project because that's always the one that has the most memories associated with it. But when I joined in 2004, from the industry, I had previously been working for over 25 years, automating car factories and other manufacturing processes in factories and manufacturing settings all over the world. I was brought in by APM Terminals, which is part of Maersk, as you all know, and the project was to create an automated terminal in the United States, the first one, and we did it on what would be the absolute definition of a greenfield site, because at the time we started our project, the terminal was a field with soybeans growing on it. It was literally nothing here. And so, being new to the industry, we knew at the time there were two automated container terminals in the world. One was in Hamburg, and one was in Rotterdam, that had been done by a group of people in each case over quite a number of years with a fairly large budget. And they were basically what I would call engineering masterpieces. We went and looked at them all and got a chance to see how they worked and talk to the people. We found that the people were very open-minded about sharing their experiences. And in our case, we didn't have 10 years to do a build. We had 3.5 years. We had a $500 million budget, and our team had less than 10 people on it. And the goal was, how do we turn that scenario into a brand new way of operating in the United States? And my particular part of the project was I designed the technology that linked everything together. And basically that included all the IT systems and most of the control systems related to equipment. I remember that we had to basically invent a solution. That meant talking to over 10 suppliers and getting everybody on the same page and teaching them what we wanted to do and what the vision was. And it was a very daunting task. And my teammates played a prank on me. They told me at the start that if anybody asked me what the productivity I was expecting on the vessel to be, I was to tell them 50 moves an hour. And so for the best part of a year, I walked around telling people that number. And every time I did, they'd start laughing at me. And, basically an indication I didn't know what I was talking about. But we kept to the goal, and that was what we kept saying. And by the time we ended up doing 45 plus gross moves per hour on a regular basis, which is pretty good. And I learned a lot along the way. And I would say from a personal perspective, one of the biggest things was I was able to take knowledge that was gained in another industry and apply it over a career that had a lot of different projects, and apply it very successfully in a completely new setting. And that was very gratifying. Lastly, I want to make a point here, and the HPC people didn't know I was going to say this, but we employed some great outside consulting help. We didn't just do this in a vacuum. We brought in people that we thought were experts and spoke to them and gained advice and had them provide opinions and such. And one of those groups was Hamburg Port Consulting. They were here at the beginning, and they visited us periodically throughout the project and gave us some honest opinions about what we were doing. And if he's out there today, maybe listening, Dr. Thomas Koch and his team were very, very instrumental in helping us make this project a success. That was a very, very rewarding experience. And one of the reasons I agreed to come today was because I feel I owe them a debt of gratitude for all their help.
Thank you so much, Rich. Thanks for sharing, and thanks for the compliments. Much appreciated. So Jan, let's go to you. With a career that spans over 3 decades in the ports and terminal sectors, how has that experience shaped your perspective on terminal automation?
Okay, thank you for the $1 million question about the future of automation. But maybe let's start like this. On one hand, we have nowadays a few trends. There is climate decarbonization. I think we better start calling it defossilization, because we'll always need carbon. That is there with a certain number of effects: activism, difficulties to get licenses, and so on and so forth. That's one thing. Then there's technology, and it's more in Rich's field, but you have hype cycles of technologies going from what was it, big data, and then blockchain, and then IoT, and now artificial intelligence. But from my point of view, we have enough technology to make the automation happen. That's the one thing. And then there's a third thing that is going on. There's quite some how would I say, geopolitical stuff at the moment going on with, for example, nearshoring and things like that coming into place. That's a few trends or a few situations that you have on one side. On the other side, you have the experience now of the, shout a number, 50, 60 container terminals that are to a certain degree automated, be it semi-automated and or fully automated. And they have the experience of sometimes having overestimated the benefits, be it productivity or be it financial or whatever, we come back to that, and underestimating risk. So if you take these two things together, what my personal opinion is that in the future, near future, far future, I don't think we will see too many big greenfield projects anymore. The types of Maasvlakte, for example. I don't think, because of the things I just said, there will be greenfield for sure, but not as they were. So I think more brownfields will be retrofitted to automation. So that's one. The second thing, what I think we will see is a kind of consolidation of the types of mode of operation. So I see less and less of crazy questions combining certain equipments with other equipments that do not exist yet. So we have a lot of mode of operations, and they work, and they can be applied to many things. And you have, of course, the high bay storage coming to the scene, which is applicable in certain cases. So a consolidation of mode of operations is a second thing I see, and then I see electrification. You had it already in the yard, of course, but now it's coming also in the horizontal transport more and more. And I've said it many times before, also internally in my previous employer, I see a great future for automated terminal tractors. Because this is in a relation with brownfield retrofit automation, you don't need to change the layout, can all fit together. So that's a third thing that I see. And a fourth thing that I see, and you see it more and more, and everybody should be doing it anyhow, things that work, like gate automation, OCR, you can start it tomorrow. The ROI is short. So summarizing, you have some trends, you have some experiences, and in my opinion, that results in these four things I just mentioned.
Thank you, Jan, for this comprehensive overview. We will touch some of these points during the discussion in more detail then. Now let's shift to Dennis. From what we have heard from Rich and Jan, and considering your experience as port advisor, what do you see as the key characteristics of the transition from a manual to an automatic semi or fully automated terminal?
I'll probably start with something touching upon what Rich said. When they started many years ago, they brought everybody together trying to make sure they understand, the different manufacturers and vendors understood what they actually wanted. I guess we've come a long way. So now I would say basically system vendors, equipment vendors, they largely understand what sort of automation is all about. I guess when it comes to the actual project, and this is automation only, it's not even brownfield yet, it's about understanding how infrastructure, how processes, how technology and how equipment and also people come together to form a coherent sort of working operation environment. I guess that is, for once and as a starting point, a very clear sort of message that I guess the organization needs to understand that only in a sort of concerted effort, all these things together deliver well-functioning automated terminals. Now, when it comes to brownfields, you're sort of adding another layer of complexity on top of it, I would argue. Because brownfield, by definition, as opposed to greenfield, where you have a business development stage, and then you get a project delivery stage, and then you get an operational stage, and they are by definition sequential. Though they have obviously handover points. In brownfield, all that happens at once. So there's a whole additional layer of coordination between those who want to deliver a project, who want to extract the value of it, but also those who want to operate and efficiently operate the terminal, because at the end of the day, the operations of today sort of pays for the conversion. So that, of course, is sort of a complex setting that I guess is often underestimated. But it's key that the project organization, the project sponsors and owners eventually understand that this complexity exists, because you will end up throughout the project in decision-making points where you have to weigh your options, and they may not be the perfect way forward, but it's about balancing all these aspects.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for mentioning already quite a few of those challenges we are facing there. Now, let's go to Rich. From a technical point of view, which is the biggest challenge terminals face when considering automation migration?
Sure. And I think Dennis made some really great points. There are a variety of risks on these projects, and some of them are very situational. And he started mentioning some of them as he considered some of the various modes of operation and differences between the trade-offs that are done, that are involved in during the decision-making process. It's for the most part, automated projects over the last 20 years have been fairly successful. You know, there have been a few cases that didn't work out. I'm not going to mention them, but you know, there are some cases that were not. But for the most part, after some period of time, even if the project started a bit slow, they all seem to get into a groove and evolve and arrive at a point very close to the final expectations that people had for the project. That's something to keep in mind, because if you have some very significant economic demands on the automation performing a task in a certain time period, you may find that you've disappointed somebody even though you've been successful at implementing the project. So you just have to make sure everybody's expectations are pretty much lined up. The case I've used several times in the past, though, when it comes to making technical changes and taking a project that works technically and thinking that, you know, you're going to just make a couple of changes, you know, it's all there, but I want to change this part and that part because my needs are different. Everybody's needs are different. And the case I have used is, it's like baking a cake. You can learn how to bake a cake and you can see all the ingredients and you write them down on a piece of paper and people can go through and look at them and say, yeah, that's how you bake a cake. And you decide, okay, well, I don't want that cake. I want a different cake. So I don't want strawberries in my cake. I want blueberries. Well, you know, you can probably make that substitution in the recipe and still get a pretty good tasting dessert. You know, it's not a problem. But if somebody decides, they change the wrong part out and they don't know what they're doing, they could say, well, I don't like eggs. I think I'll leave eggs out, or I'll throw some oil in or something else. I'll use rice flour instead of wheat flour or whatever. If you go through and make the wrong mistakes, you could end up with something that's not a cake anymore. It's a big pan of goo and nobody wants to eat it. So be careful when you start changing the recipe. The recipe that works, and then you can customize it in certain areas if you know what you're doing and if you're careful. The other thing that's important is that you must understand your processes. There's going to be a period of interoperability between the brownfield site that's running and the green and the portions that are being changed. Understand how these two things are going to interoperate during the launch period for the automation, or you might end up with something that's very difficult to operate consistently while you're trying to bring the new systems online. And finally, realize that when it comes to technology, not everybody likes change. You know, some people don't want change. And so you have to be able to understand all of the stakeholders, workers, mechanics, vehicle operators, truck drivers, everybody. They must understand what's going on, and you need to manage the stakeholders and their expectations very carefully.
Thank you very much, Rich. I don't know why I have now some appetite for a cake, but anyways, we will be touching further technical aspects shortly. So let's go on to Jan first again. I'm curious to hear your insights on commercial planning. it is noticeable that expectations around productivity and cost savings seem to overshoot reality. So Rich mentioned already his advertisement in the beginning of the automation of the terminal. Can you shed also some light on why that is?
Well, there are a few things. Let's maybe start with productivity. There's a lot of improvement the last year that I've seen in projects that I've been involved with, but people have to see that compared to a manual terminal, an automated terminal is a system. It's not a combination of a few parts that are manually driven, but it is a system. And a few things contribute to the success of a system. One of them, for example, is I always give this example, is reliability of equipment. So if you have a manual terminal and a piece of equipment, a straddle carrier, breaks down, you put it aside, take a new one, and you're up and running. If you have an automated terminal, for example, an apron with AGVs, you probably have to shut down part of the apron. You have to do a big plan B, and that has an effect on the whole system and on a productivity drop at that moment and further along the way. The other thing is that if you are working in such a system and you have those breakdowns, you have per definition a manual intervention, and every manual intervention that you do in an automated system is bad, is not good. So you want to stay away with manual interventions from a system. And the last thing I would say, and I was surprised by that, we try to automate every exception. We still do. And I was 6-7 years ago, and a terminal, which I also will not mention, and they simply said, all the exceptions we do manual. We have a few reach stackers, we have a few terminal tractors, and if there is an exception, we do it in between the legs of the crane. And I said, well, that's nice. So they said, we only automate the standard boxes, the 20 foot, the 40 foot, the 45 foot, and all the rest we do manual. So these factors have an influence on productivity. There are more, probably. On the finance side, and there my eyes were opened, I think 10-15 years ago, because in the reasoning that we as engineers or operators do, we usually talk about EBITDA, right? And if you look at the operational cost, yes, in general, it's lower on an automated terminal than on a manual terminal. Maintenance is roughly the same. Operations cost definitely lower. IT cost much higher. But in general, it's lower. But then that financial director told me, but Jan, go a little bit lower till the last line of the P&L. Go to the last line of the P&L, profit after tax. And there, of course, you have all the depreciations of the capex intensive stuff that is sitting in your terminal. And if you are going to compare EBITDA, you have a different story than if you are going to compare profit after tax. So that's my take on that finance side. So when terminals, where organizations start to think about automation, you have, of course, the whole technical part and operational part, but you have the financial part, which obviously takes most of the time the decision. And then profit after tax is interesting to look at. It's a consideration where the group where I usually work with, engineers, operators, not often look at. It's important. So those are a few whys on productivity and on financial expectations.
Thank you very much, Jan. Being an economist, I like to hear this information. Thanks a lot. So let's go to Dennis. Reflecting on Jan's insights, could you share where we stand today in the transition to terminal automation, especially focusing on the processes and planning involved? And what are critical steps we've taken so far to ensure that this transition is as seamless as possible, considering uninterrupted operations is non-negotiable? And maybe you can also say a few words on the learning curves compared to the earlier projects you've been involved in.
I'll try to remember all the questions, but yeah, I will. I guess let me start by saying what we've learned, or what probably we should have learned, and how we should probably approach it. I guess there's, and Rich alluded to it, understand the processes. And I guess since it's brownfield, we do have obviously existing processes, the to-be, the future processes, but then very critically what I would call hybrid mode. So the coexistence of two different operating modes. And the crux is that evolves over time. So as you grow, as you grow through the transition, the optimization of that coexistence changes as you go along. So that's a very critical sort of component to understand and optimize these processes. Now, they are, of course, somehow and regionally, locally, possibly impacted by what authorities want you to do. You know, safety regulations, all the rest of it obviously come into play there, which we need to consider. And then once you know what you want to do, you somehow need to implement that. And that's where you need to understand what is your current application landscape? Which systems do you have in play? How do they talk to each other? How do they interrelate? And especially brownfield, these systems have grown often over decades and incur some, shall we say, unwelcome surprises as we start untangling them. So having a solid understanding of that is obviously key and critical. And that with that probably as in as a transition to the question of learning curves, I guess we've learned a lot, and there's a lot of standardization obviously sort of underway. You know, TIC 4.0 is out there. We do have PAMA working on a couple of sort of good initiatives to help sort of shape that learning curve. And whilst it might have a bit of an impact, especially in brownfield, the due diligence and care that you need to plan for that transition, I would probably advise people to spend the due time to do that. I guess where we can see some learnings and hence savings and some time is how we put the different systems together, how they integrate in the future state. Now, given the current state and hence the transition towards the future state is very site specific, given the sort of incumbent systems, that's just something we need to apply some attention to. And then very lastly and quickly, I guess what's really, really important is as we plan and as we go through the project, things change because we will find solutions that are not necessarily 100% suited to what we wanted to do initially, because an authority asks us to do something and then we need to change path. And as we have slight deviations from the original plan and we continue to have deviations, expectation management is key. So to a previous point made, we need to make sure that we're always in the solution we're drafting and seeing that we still check in whether we're delivering on the original plan and feedback whether we can meet those initial expectations and the business plan to basically avoid sort of surprises with the shareholders, with the owners of the project when it finally gets delivered.
Thank you very much, Dennis. So you touched already an important point, namely avoiding disruption, and that implies that any strategy for automation must include robust contingency plans. So thorough testing, phased implementation strategies that safeguard operational continuity at all times. So going to Rich, could you give a brief, I know it's challenging, but brief overview of the technical aspects involved? So how can terminals effectively address the technical challenges of integrating new automation technology with existing systems to maintain operational continuity?
Sure. One of the things to remember is that there are a lot of technical things, for example, the operation of a terminal operating system that are going to span whether you're operating in a high technology terminal or a conventional terminal. There's things that are going to be common to both operations, and so the notion of managing the introduction of technology does not have to be a big bang where all of a sudden all the technology comes online at the same time, and everybody's learning how the new equipment works and how the technology that surrounds it and makes it all work together is happening, et cetera. That creates an enormous training problem and an enormous reliability problem, and unfortunately can create a big safety problem when it comes to how it operates. So when it comes to the technology, there should be a technology map, something that basically takes where the terminal is headed and recognizes the components that could be introduced, implemented sooner rather than later, where processes that exist today could be changed in advance and made to work with the technology that's going to be consistent with the automated system, gets done before the rest of the software or rest of the hardware is developed. I mean, the long lead item is going to be the construction. I mean, they're going to be pouring concrete and creating structures and berths and all that kind of thing for a long time. While that's all happening, you can take advantage of that time to get your terminal operating system updated, to get the people trained on how it's going to work, to teach them how the processes work, even with conventional equipment. And then at the end of the day, when you plug the automated stuff in, it runs very much the same way, very similarly, but it happens to run in a way that's that fits into what they largely know. So there'll be a few differences, but it's not going to be as significant. So managing that introduction time, taking advantage of the time when you're leading up to the launch and getting people trained and up to speed on what's going on is a very important thing. The technology does not expect that it's dealing with people who do not know what they're doing. It's very unforgiving. It has to be done the right way every single time. So, pick the technologies, make sure that people know what they're about. There are some process elements that are not very consistent with each other, and those can be real challenging. If you have a existing facility that's an RTG facility, and you're going to put in automated ASCs, for example, automatic storage cranes, and you're probably going to go from a coupled operation where containers that were involving an RTG yard are landing on the back of a UTR that's got a chassis or bomb cart or something on it and being toted over to a RTG and put away. That's a coupled operation. Whereas the ASC operation is going to be decoupled. The boxes are going to land on the ground. They're going to be picked up by a mini Strat and carried over and dropped in a transfer zone near one of the stacks and put away. Those two methods of operation do not work together very well at all. You really have to be careful operating UTRs where there's strads operating. There's safety hazards associated with that. So recognize those kinds of constraints and plan for them right up front.
Thank you so much, Rich. And so let me have a quick look what the audience is saying. Please use the chat to pose your questions and give us your comments. And so far I see here one question for Rich again. And that is, if you could pick the top three of your experience in transformation, what would you have done differently, or what should have been done differently?
Well, now, this is a tough question because when I say this, people are going to think I'm overconfident or something. But here's the bottom line: we've done. I think I calculated just under $3 billion worth of projects in the last 20 years. And there's about 5 of them. I'm actually doing one right now. I'm in the middle of an $800 million project converting part of one of the terminals in Norfolk from a Strat facility to a ASC facility. To be honest, every single project has finished on time. Every single project has finished on budget, and every single project has worked exactly as planned. So I don't have any that I can point out, honestly. They've all been exactly what we expected. Not a problem that we did not anticipate and work around and plan. Now, we work a lot of time. There's a lot of hands-on effort here to make this happen, but there's not a thing that I've done that I would do differently.
Thanks for sharing, Rich. And I can only say congratulations. And I think a lot also is put down to very good and thorough planning in the beginning, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Now let's focus our shift. Let's shift our focus to Jan again. Given your extensive experience in the field of equipment technology, how do you see the complexity of switching automated system in terms of quality, equipment reliability, and maintenance philosophy of the manufacturers? Can you explain what should change here to better meet the requirements of automated terminals?
A few things have been mentioned already, but let me give you a little bit the engineering angle with focus on operations and processes. In my experience, when I bought 30 years ago my first key crane, the specifications document was 32 pages. That crane is still working today. We have evolved in our companies to specification documents that are today 400, 500 pages if you print them out. And all of a sudden, and we mix ourselves in the material of the axles of the gearboxes, just to give an example. And then automation came around the corner, and all of a sudden there's a chapter automation. And that chapter automation that grew over the years, but and it got better all the time. But really, what Dennis and Rich have said before, I think we should really understand the processes and make more and more a functional description, because for a lot of functional problems or functional functions that you expect, several technical solutions are possible. And I don't know if we and it's a thought. I don't know if we still have to describe them in detail. I think we must evolve far better in describing the function or the process that we expect. That's one thing. In those technical specifications, what we also, and that was my experience of the last 7, 8, 9 years, is we always at the end come with service level agreements expectations. I think they should be addressed from the very beginning in your team with the suppliers. What do we now really expect if that thing goes live? What do we still expect from the suppliers? And describe that very well. So that's on the specification side. And then there is reliability. I touched it in the beginning, and it is maybe my dada. I don't know how we say that in English. But if you're going to build a greenfield terminal, or for the sake of the discussion, a brownfield terminal, and you automate that site, the equipment that you put in place has to be far more, and I don't mean a little bit, I mean far more reliable than your manual equipment. On top of what I'm saying now is it is, the Latinists would say, it's a contradictio in terminis, because the equipment becomes more complicated. I don't like the word complex. It's more complicated. There are more sensors, there are cameras, there are all kinds of stuff that can extra break down compared to a manual crane. So where I say that the specifications have to be transformed in functional specifications, we must also design for reliability. And I gave it in a pre-COVID talk the following example. If you have a mean move between failure on your key crane, just stay with the key cranes, of 1,500, which is a typical value, and you do today an exchange of 10,000 containers on a vessel, which is also a not exotic value, you break down 7 times on that vessel. Cannot happen in an automated system. And I'm only talking about the key cranes. Then you have the yard and the horizontal equipment. So we need to design for reliability, and you need to have a technical organization that that is ready to maintain a reliable piece of equipment and keep it reliable. So if you have you have an existing, or say an RTG terminal, and they're used to working with the old KPIs, and we're happy with all of that. And if you move with them to you start, and I'm not even making it complicated like Rich did to switch the mode of operations. No, you just continue with automated RTGs. Those automated RTGs must really make a step up, but not a small step up, a big step up in reliability. So before that equipment arrives, your whole maintenance organization has to be upgraded. And I mean upgraded as to system, as to principle, from a preventive maintenance organization like we have typically in most of the terminals still today, to a reliability centered organization. It's super critical that the equipment doesn't break down. So those are, from the equipment point of view, processes, functional specs, service level agreements, and reliability is super critical on an automated terminal. My engineering angle. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jan. So that was the engineering angle. Now we come a bit to the people angle, and I would like to address Dennis with a twofold question. One is, how crucial is it to include the operations teams in the migration process from the start, and which benefits do you see from their early involvement? It's the one thing. And secondly, when it comes to automating processes and the way for paving the way for acceptance, authorities play a significant role alongside the other stakeholders and shareholders. And from your experience, can you share some insights on the nuances of communicating with the relevant authorities, and what makes this communication unique, and why is it vital to ensure this?
Well, and I'll probably use an example from what we currently do in Adelaide. So when we deliver brownfield projects, from a project perspective, let's understand what our role is. We are a service provider to the operations, right? So we are delivering a project for them, and to do it successfully, we've got to bring them on board. So we need to work closely with the management team, so they sign off and understand what we do, and they agree, because we cannot do the project to them, but we've got to do it with them. So that's the one layer. The second is it's invaluable, honestly, to bring people from the organization with operational backgrounds into the project team. Why is that? Because they know how it's done today anyway. So they understand the processes, they understand the specifics of the site, and you need to couple that with people who've actually implemented automation elsewhere. So the winning formula really is bringing that together, bringing the locally experienced people who are keen on change, who are supporters, who will be the change agents moving forward, into the project team, because they will have the reputation also on the terminal to tell that story of the benefits that are being realized through that transition or transformation. They also play a pretty vital role on your question of the authority intervention, that probably sort of plays a role here. And I give an example on reefer handling, for example. Here in Europe, I wouldn't say relaxed, but we're pretty flexible with having ASCs, for example, operate in an area at a reefer rack where there's people working sort of on other reefer towers. In Australia, that is something we haven't seen, right? So the overall sort of layout of the reefer racks and the reefer areas is fundamentally different, just because what the safe work authorities typically agree to is fundamentally different in Australia, or has been thus far at least, than what we're seeing in Europe. So in order to understand what can and can't be approved, you got to talk to them. And I guess the approach is really to understand what that stakeholder group demands, and how they want to be involved. And that's probably more down to the personality of the people you're dealing with than the organization itself. So and people from the organization will have these existing ties to understand, do we go with an open mind into a discussion and co-shape a solution, or do we in actual fact go there, with a fully fleshed out, fully supported, fully tested concept, so that by the time we start discussing with them, we actually put on the table a approvable concept that may be tested from third parties and elsewhere. But that is something that only the people that we have with local experience can actually help us with.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Dennis. Great. We have here a question from the audience to Rich, and also something that relates to one of the questions we have, namely, what are the strategies most effective in preparing terminal staff for the transition to new automation systems and in managing stakeholder expectations to mitigate the impact of the migration, and how to reduce employees' fears during the whole process?
Well, I think I mentioned before the notion of starting early and introducing the technology in bits and pieces so that people get used to it before the big day comes that you start trying to turn on automation. One thing that we've done, and my new role, I mentioned my role in the first project was I did the technical design. There were other people who managed construction and other people who managed equipment, and I did IT and technology. In my newer projects over the last 15 years, I have been responsible for the entire project, which means I have all the construction, all the equipment acquisition, all the interface with operations, et cetera. So one of the things I've been able to do that's been really helpful is I have a respected, responsible person with authority that is an operations person that reports to me for the duration of the project. So when it comes time for us to talk about something that needs to involve operations, I have somebody that I can bring in and talk to them and make sure they know what's going on. They're fully up to speed on the plans, and then they go over and they know all the different people and where they sit and what they think about and what shifts they work and all that kind of stuff, and make sure that everybody knows what's happening. And that's a big deal. It can't be that, oh, that's the project team and they're just doing whatever and, let's just, ignore them. It's got to be that it's a task that affects everybody, because if you're not careful, one of the side effects is not only people don't know what's going on, but you can have safety problems. You've got big pieces of equipment that are digging holes in the ground and doing all kinds of stuff. And it's got to be that you can operate in that vicinity and not have to worry that you're going to lose your life. So we have operations fully integrated on our team, and that's a huge advantage. So that would be about the most important thing I can say, other than getting as many people trained as early as possible.
Thanks very much for sharing, Rich. So speaking about people, let's assume the following scenario. Imagine a terminal that is both operational and in transformation project mode, and a situation that could, in the worst case, last maybe some 5 years. So it's clear that the same individuals can't handle both the day-to-day operations and the project management simultaneously. This presents not only a staffing issue, but also is a question of expertise. So while temporary consultants can offer support, the core of the work requires a level of preparation for self-sufficiency. So how do you manage this challenge, Rich?
Well, the integration with operations is very important, as I mentioned. So we have had, in our most recent projects, talk about doing crazy things. When I came back to Virginia in 2016, the first 2 projects I implemented were to convert the 2 primary container terminals in the port. There were 3, but there were 2 that did virtually 90% of the work. Simultaneously convert both terminals from manual operations into semi-automated operations, and those projects lasted 4 years. So I think we've seen it, we know what it looks like, and it's about keeping people. People have to understand it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. That there's a need to do things in a very organized way. You mentioned planning. That's a big deal. One of the things that we do in order to allow more people to participate in a casual way is and I missed it this morning, unfortunately. I have a morning meeting that happens every single weekday, Monday through Friday, at 8:30 a.m. And the project team assembles in a room and discusses amongst themselves. We go around the room and everybody says, what are they going to do that day? Included in that meeting is a conference call dial-in number. And it's not unusual for there to be as many as 15 people dialed into that number each morning, because they know if they call in at 8:30, several things are going to happen. The entire project team is going to be available for a question they might have, and they're going to get to hear what the current things that are happening on the facility are. Now, when it comes to the project team itself, I personally do a roll call of everybody on the team, and there's about 12 people, and we go around and either they're in the room or they're on the call, and we walk through all of them. And then we open it up, and anybody that has a question can ask the question and get an answer. We take formal minutes. The minutes are in a binder that you can go back and look at. We've done over 2,000 of those meetings, and they happen every single day. If I'm out, if I'm traveling or whatever, somebody runs the meeting, as happened this morning, because I was here briefing and getting ready for this project, for this seminar. But it's at the end of a meeting, it's incredible. Even the people on the call that listen and don't say anything, as many as a dozen people speak not at all, but end up hanging up when we close the call out. So we know that there's people out there that are taking advantage of the availability of information. In addition, every single month we have what's called a steering committee meeting that involves all the C-level people in the company, the entire Port of Virginia, part of the government of the state of Virginia. The entire C-level group that runs all the ports are in a meeting. We had one yesterday afternoon, and we briefed them on all the projects and all the risks. And I will tell you, we pull no punches. If there's something going wrong, they know about it. They know about any budget issues that are showing up and what we're doing to fix them. And it's all about keeping people informed. And I think that if they're informed, you find out they've got a lot more stamina and ability to tolerate the long durations than if they're just getting blasted with uncertainty every day.
Thanks very much, Rich. It's impressive information. Jan, what is your perspective? Which approach is being taken to assemble the right project team, and how are competency gaps, particularly in automation, being addressed?
Well, the interesting thing, what you said in your question to Rick is, imagine a terminal that is potentially 5 years in project mode, and I've been involved in one of those, which is still going on. Not my involvement, but the terminal. So you have a straddle carrier terminal, fully straddle carrier, that started with 2 automated stacking crane stacks. So you have a mixed mode. Then another one was added, and another 7 were added. And then it ran like that through COVID all the way as a mixed mode. And now the company has decided to completely retrofit the straddle carrier yard with ASCs. So this is a 5-year project. That terminal will be in project mode for 5 years. Bringing that team together, the first stacks that were set were basically done by 2 or 3 people on a Sunday evening. I must say, highly admirable, working 24 hours. That doesn't work anymore. So for those kind of projects, you need a separate project team. And you can do a few things, but my personal opinion is your automated system is your core. You have to own your core. So it was said by Dennis and Rich before, the project manager who has done this before can potentially be an external consultant who has done this before, does project management, knows how to do this. That's all fine, because a project has an end. In this case, it's 5 years. But the people who are in that project team, they have to own the equipment, have to own the TOS, have to own the IT, and have to be able, and that's personnel planning then at a certain moment, have to be able to migrate into the standing organization, because the standing organization is doing their stuff. they cannot do this on a site. They unless they would be overstaffed. So set up a separate project organization is necessary with accountable people in it. And like Rich, I don't know what English word you use, but an accountable people who, if you have an operational question, he can decide or can go to his colleagues and can talk to you as a decision taker. As to competences, it's training, it's attitude, it's the willingness of the people that you put on the team to train and to be trained, and then to migrate once the project is done in the standing organization, bringing all the experience from that project in the team. And communication on that, it was said before many times, a terminal is in project mode. There is continuously an attention necessary for safety. Continuously, the operations cannot do anymore what they want to do on an existing terminal. Sometimes they have to drive with their containers 300 meters to pass the stacks that are being built, and so on and so forth. So project organization, but in that project group, you need the future owners of the system. It's my opinion.
Thank you, Jan. So cooperation is key, as in most projects in our industry. Dennis, could you shed some light on the importance of staff training and support in ensuring a smooth transition in the migration process? And additionally, as automation increasingly becomes an integral part of operations, how do you see staff development evolving to meet this new technology landscape?
Yeah, I guess, look, a lot has probably already been said about sort of the components of how to set up the team and how to establish it, and I totally agree with what's been said. I guess what's fair to say and mention is we need to recognize that when identifying the people from the standing organization, so that operations representative, for example, these are the people who know how things are done, but also, of course, since they've done it a certain way for so long, it just feels natural to them to do it exactly that way. You know, much like we don't think about certain things when we drive a car to put on the indicator, just because it comes natural. So we need the open-mindedness, of course, of these experienced people to do the transition. When it comes to the new staff that we're probably bringing on board, the more they're exposed, obviously, to the new ways of working, the more natural it sort of becomes for them. So I guess here it's really the combination of the existing very well experienced workforce sharing their insights on how effective operation can be supported, and couple that with the new entrants, so to speak, to make sure we're probably also implementing a bit of the disruption to the sort of previous ways of working. And look, we got Rich here, who came from an automotive sort of industry, which is a perfect example. Even on the project side, how do you bring in other industries' expertise and hence bring the learning on? And I guess it's probably fair to say, if we're critical about our own industry, we're not necessarily first movers in innovation across the board. If we're being honest, there's other industries who implement new tech a bit faster, I would say. The one thing on training I really want to mention, because we must not leave that out, and it was mentioned around a sort of safety concern, possibly otherwise, is do train your clients, do train the truckers, do train people who visit the terminal, especially as you do brownfield conversion. You will have construction site over construction site all across the terminal, moving back and forth all the time. Make sure people understand where that is, what the actual behavior is to master that, because only then we can actually guarantee that people go home safe at the end of the shift. Not just our own people, but also our clients. And I guess that's just something that cannot be underestimated as an effort. So that's probably just something on training which I really want to add to.
Thanks a lot, Dennis. That's a really important issue. And another essential aspect is, in this regard, data transfer. So, Rich, Can you highlight methods to secure data during terminal transition, ensuring that no loss or corruption occurs?
Let me turn my microphone back on. So it's an interesting question, but here's the thing now. The worry, in a general sense, the worry about data corruption and data security has a place when it comes to automation, but it's slightly different than the place it has when it comes to what are called information technology systems, IT systems. So in the IT space, you've got word processors, you've got email systems, and so on. And the rules and the concerns and the ability to go and talk to the internet and somehow maybe download a virus or have something that becomes corrupted because somebody brings something in from home or plugs something in wrong. That's all stuff that's a very common, almost everyday concern. When it comes to the operational technology networks that run computer systems that are running automated vehicles, you don't have that. For example, all of our cranes are on private fiber networks. They all go through a very carefully engineered connection scheme that goes between equipment and the server room where all the control servers are running. It's not the same network as the person who's working on email is at. There is no connection to the internet. There is no ability for an outside force to come in and somehow compromise or get the security or the integrity wrong. So we spend a very large amount of time on that aspect of engineering. Having said that, we also still worry that somehow somebody could gain access to the system and compromise an automation network and in turn do purposeful harm to people. So we still worry about cybersecurity, but the design of the network and the equipment that's selected and the interconnection modes that are used to connect everything together are engineered to the point where there is no loss of data. I mean, we run 24 hours a day, some extremely high data transfer rates, and we have zero errors. Zero, not 1 or 2 an hour, none. And that's because of how it's been engineered. So it is possible. I know of one project where they ultimately fixed it, where they turned over the job of engineering the network to somebody that did local hotel systems. And so they got a network that was connecting all their RMG stacks together, and one stack went to the next, and went to the next, and went to the next. It was like a big circle of all these stacks talking to each other. The problem is that by the time a piece of information got from a crane that needed a response all the way through the network, 3 seconds had elapsed. Well, in the automation world, 3 seconds is like 3 millennia. It's like 3 years. We look at response times that are less than 100 milliseconds, in many cases, less than 10 milliseconds. So the notion of networking, if you have to ask about data corruption, you probably have not designed the whole thing properly. It should be designed to the point where that's not a concern anymore. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be worried about cybersecurity and somebody gaining inappropriate access and being able to protect against that.
Yes, thank you so much, Rich. And it's really important aspect, and we should all keep that in mind. Let's now shift our focus to one of the commonly underestimated parts of an automation project, and that's the testing phase. So, Jan, why is testing often taken too lightly in automation projects, and how can an adequate testing setup be ensured?
Well, two things. I don't think that testing is taken too lightly, but I do think that because of decision taking, slow decision taking, potential delay in the project, but the vessel is coming on a certain date, and that doesn't change, that the time for testing is compromised. I've been in several projects. You have a late delivery. You have a time in the project that things go a little bit slower. You have some setbacks you have to correct, and the time that is originally planned for testing it is just shortened, but the vessel is there. So my take on testing, I don't think it's underestimated, but the time with real equipment testing is in practice often too short. Now, how to prevent that and how technologically set up a good testing system from the TOS until the PLC, which I think should be done, is maybe more Richard's baby instead of mine. I'm always worried at the end, the time left for testing on the field. So maybe
Quick.
Sure.
So I agree with what Jan just said. The method that I told you about bringing everybody into the room once a month helps provide you some cover in this area. For example, the ship's not going to arrive 4 months late in a week. You know, it's going to happen over a period of time. The project timeline having and getting compressed and whatever is going to happen over a period of time. If you have enough short-term milestones, you become aware of that problem sooner than later. When you're in the room with the CEO, and if you say, oh yeah, we're going to figure out a way to take our 3-month test plan and run it in a month, then you made a big mistake. You're going to tell them, no, sorry, I understand all those things, but it's a 3-month task and I'm not going to shorten it. Done. Now, that's what I do. And if you don't do that, then you have a chance of just disappointing people when it's over. Well, you said you were going to get it done. You'd be surprised at how many people are, if they know what the problem is and they've been involved and they know how hard everybody's working, are willing to take that kind of a scenario and deal with it rather than make some ridiculous, unachievable, prone to failure demand that you shorten the testing time up, because it will show up. It'll end up showing up that you don't achieve your goals in the right time frame, that it will take much longer to bring the system up to full capacity if you don't test it properly to start with, and you're running it every day in operational mode and trying to improve it, versus you kept it out of production for a month and you made a bunch of fixes, and now when it comes up, it's closer to what it needs to be in order to operate properly. You'll get to the final result much quicker if you take that delay up front rather than try and spread it out over the life of the launch project, part of the project.
If you have planned for 3 months, you need the 3 months, and you cannot shorten it. But I've been under pressure a lot of time because the vessel is coming. It's a contractual issue. But you're right. As a team, they have to fix it.
Thanks a lot to both of you. So let's continue with you, Dennis. Given that automation has been progressing for nearly 3 decades in the port sector, what challenges have prevented the establishment of universal standards? And additionally, how does the diversity in existing infrastructure influence the strategy in implementing automation in brownfield terminals? So which tailored solutions have been successful to your knowledge?
Let me probably start by saying, and just following on from the discussion we've just heard, stories like this. Towards the end we're shortening testing periods, and then we try to go live anyway, and then we see how it doesn't work. That's what makes the news, right? So I guess that's where people get that notion, and where people who are supportive of not automating obviously get their fuel from that. They see, you see, it's complex, it cannot work, it doesn't deliver all these things. So I guess if you look at sort of the key success criteria for this, I guess it's very key to understand that, especially for brownfield, there's probably not the 100% plug and play blueprint solution that we already have established in the market. We need to be aware that it needs a dedicated team. It needs a dedicated team working together, much like Rich just said, and it needs the sort of due time. I guess from the other perspective is, let's not shy away from the fact that the investment that is tied to a brownfield project is substantial, and the potential business disruptions are massive. So there is a huge inherent risk. So unless from a, so to speak, total cost of ownership of that project compared to the continuation of the status quo, unless you have a massive gain from automation that is almost guaranteed. I guess a lot of people just sort of shy away from it just because they do see the complexity and they probably can't picture having that dedicated team of many people who start delivering those brownfield concepts. So I guess if you put all that in place, if you have the right people, if you have the support from the owners, if you do create the clarity that Rich and Jan we're speaking to, and hence have adequate and realistic expectations, that's obviously a good starting point. And then reliance on proven existing technology. Don't reinvent the wheel as you're just redesigning your facility. Do not overcomplicate things is probably the one key takeaway I would also want to give to the audience.
Thanks, Dennis, for sharing that with us. So as we conclude our event, we would like to take just one more question from the audience here, which reads, what's your view whether automation is also for small terminals, or would you tend to say that automation is more for sites with substantial volumes to ensure enough basic underlying business cases for automation, which requires high investments and a lot of efforts to implement? So maybe, Dennis, you can take the challenge to give us a brief answer to that one.
I'll try a brief answer. It's not just volume, it's also volume consistency, right? So I guess if you have a big terminal that handles, I don't know, 3 million TU or 5, a certain consistency in utilization of the equipment sort of comes natural. However, if you have, I don't know, 250,000 or 500,000 TU a year, and you have a very or fairly sort of frequent arrival of ships and hence sort of service to be provided to your clients, and with that you get a decent utilization of your assets, you may very, very well still be in an area where automation is advantageous, which then obviously much depends on the cost structures that the terminal has at the moment.
Thank you. And now we are going to wrap up our discussion, and I'd like to invite each of our speakers to share their final thoughts. So considering the specific context of brownfield terminal automation transition, how do you envision the terminals adapting to future demands and technological advancements? So Rich, 1 minute please for your final thoughts.
Well, I'm going to answer, but it's kind of a little bit tangential. What I thought would be helpful here is to try and provide some parting words, as you suggested, to kind of wrap up some of what we've talked about today. But there's an aspect of this that we haven't discussed, we kind of alluded to it, and that has to do with people getting tired of a project that runs for a very long time and running out of energy and having and basically not being able to cope. I have to tell you, the fact that automation projects have generally done fairly well and finished and ultimately achieved their final goal is a good thing. What's not clear to a lot of people is how much work it takes to make one of these projects happen. Please do not underestimate how much involvement there will be and how many things have to be tracked and communicated and paid attention to. You won't believe what I'm about to say. I work every day, Saturdays, Sundays, every day. And that's because it's virtually impossible to keep up on all the various aspects of what needs to be done and achieve my record of 100% success, if you will, by not doing that. I mean, I have great people on my team, fantastic people, but that still does not rule out the fact that I am in checking and rechecking and asking questions and having conversations, etc. I think my door's been closed more today during this conference than it is in the last 2 weeks, because my door's open all the time and people have an opportunity to walk in any time and ask any questions. That availability, that ability to get questions answered, to make decisions, that's critical to having a success. So be prepared for a very difficult project, but at the same a period of time in your life. But at the same time, there's nothing much more gratifying than when you see something you've worked on for 3, 4, or 5 years come online and work, and that everybody's appreciative of it. So that's probably the biggest thing. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing a brownfield terminal or greenfield terminal or whatever. Just plan on a lot of work.
Thank you very much, Rich. And now coming to Jan, what are your closing words in 1 minute, please?
In 1 minute. Well, they're fairly similar, but I would focus more on the decision taking. So spend time on the assumptions. Really talk all the assumptions through with your complete team, and I know it's not easy, and all of a sudden you want the commercial guy to give his view on the next 20 or 25 years, and you want the financial guy, you want everybody, and we don't know what will happen in the next 20 years. And still, what you see designs of terminals or simulations or graphs being produced till, I would say, 2 figures behind the comma. It's not necessary. You need an 80-20 approach. This is agreed by everybody in the same risk boat, and then decide. So Rick said it a few times, start early with agreeing on the assumptions. We came to a point at a certain moment in my previous company that we didn't even start talking about a layout or an automation project if not a certain A4 was filled and signed by a group of people that also didn't know the end answer or the final end state. But we have to start, and you have to take a decision early to make sure that it's going somewhere. It's the decision taking is, in my view, easier than it sounds and can go quicker. But of course, there's a lot of risk in, but you have to take the risk altogether.
Thank you very much, Jan. And now, last but not least, Dennis.
1 minute, I reckon.
Absolutely.
Let me try. I guess more a wish than sort of a concluding remark. I guess when you think about automation, be mindful of the fact that the supporting IT systems, especially the TOS, is the brain, and it is extremely important to be up to date, up to speed, well integrated. That all the IT components and functions that make up an automated terminal work well with each other. I guess what I find quite often is people, given we're coming from an asset-heavy industry, people very often substantially initially underestimate the investment it takes to build all these IT systems, to maintain it, and to keep it sort of up to speed. So I guess much like we're investing all that money in maintaining and upgrading our infrastructure in our equipment, just be mindful that you got to do the same for the IT systems, because without these, an automated terminal is not going to work. And just keep that in mind, latest when you build the business case, that there is a recurring cost to keeping the brain running and have the blood flow through it.
Thank you very much, Dennis, Rich and Jan, for your closing words. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a remarkable journey today, diving into the complexities of terminal automation transformation. So I trust you have found the shared viewpoints and discussions enriching. As we wrap up this episode, I'd like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed guest here for their profound expertise and commitment to the world of ports and terminals. So thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and insights with us today. And to you, our great audience, thank you very much for tuning in today and being part of this journey. We hope you found the conversation stimulating and insightful. So, as usual, this session has been recorded and will be made available shortly on our YouTube channel via the HPC website. So big thanks also to the production team behind the scenes and especially to Hafen Hamburg Marketing. Our next session of Connecting Ports will continue debating what matters, and we hope to see you again on June 26. So please save the date and more information will follow soon. Until then, goodbye and tschüss from Hamburg.